Welcome, my friends. This is Maniacal Incorporated, and we return to Victoria 3 after a rather lengthy absence. I believe a new patch has dropped in that length of time, which is affecting the way the AI uses its ports, so it's going to be interesting to see if that has any effect on the game. The series is going a bit slower than I anticipated, and I do want to see it out. I would like to get to the 1930s. I would like to try and build up an army and liberate Ireland from Britain. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to stop focusing as much on all of the economic buildings that I'm building. So I won't be mentioning every single one. I will focus on military upgrades and how we develop our military to hopefully remove us from the grips of Great Britain, and I will of course also focus on political matters. We have recently seen the red flag of communism raised in France and in the United Syndicates, and I think that some of the major powers are becoming rather worried that the same thing could happen here in Ireland. The industrialists and the petty bourgeoisie are now both led by Republicans. And Thomas Glenavy is pretty much the leader of the largest, most powerful faction in the state. Well, on their own, I actually think the Conservatives might be slightly more powerful. Nah, maybe not. But the Conservatives are generally royalist anyway. They are committed to maintaining the monarchy. I get a feeling, however, that Glenavy would like to see the monarchy reformed and done away with to avoid a slide towards the radical policies being put forward by the intelligentsia and the trade unionists. He wouldn't be able to push for, we'll say, a republic right now because the Conservative Party is too strong, and instead what he's going to do is he's going to suggest reforms to the monarchy. He's going to claim that it is to preserve the monarchy, to give these groups some concessions, to keep them happy. But in reality, what he is focusing on doing is weakening the power of the Conservative Party. And one of the concessions that he is going to suggest is decreasing the power of the devout faction, which isn't something that the monarch would do normally as a member of the devout faction. And we're going to instead try and switch to private schools, which is endorsed by the intelligentsia and the industrialists, and it will hopefully begin to hit the support of the devout faction.
3 hours later.
The government is in anarchy. The leader of the militarist faction, Murragh Fitzmaurice, has just died at the same time that we have been informed of a devout scandal. It has been revealed that Harry Hamilton of the Devout has been having a secret affair with a member of the clergy. His resignation is being demanded. We got a statue of him built in Ulster in the last episode. And I think with this scandal, the death of a royalist, I'm not too sure who has now taken over the militarist group or the armed forces, but I think the industrialists most certainly would step in at this stage and encourage His Majesty to resign. William Hamilton ascends to the throne of Ireland on the abdication in shame of his father. William is largely disliked and possibly has very little interest in the throne. He's a Republican and also is interested in the armed forces. If we look at the armed forces, Alexander Maguire has become the new head of the armed forces. So the industrialists have gotten a Republican supporter on the throne. They now have a communist in the Conservative Party, where all good conservatives, or where all good communists go, I should say. Government legitimacy has absolutely tanked And we're actually looking at a stage where the industrialists and the petty bourgeoisie on their own would make up 41, as would just the industrialists on their own. The industrialists are now basically in a position to cement their control, and that's what they're going to do. They're not going to overplay their hand and kick out the petty bourgeoisie, but this is something that many in Ireland have been dreaming of for decades, the removal of the devout and the Conservative Party from power. We will recruit a new general for the Indonesian headquarters. We have Brian Hill and Fionnán Mornington. Fionnán is cruel. Brian is reserved. Not very popular. Well, I can't imagine either of the two of them are very popular. He's a bandit. Oh my god, neither of these two is very popular. I think His Majesty, being a member of the Armed Forces Interest Group, would probably support somebody who is less popular than him. So we're going to install Brian. We're beginning a slight increase in the size of the army. Just as we're being told that that our prestige has dropped and we will fall outside of the major powers, and we have also been informed that an heir apparent has been born, a devout, just like his grandfather, with a weird little collar floating about him. And he's a royalist. And we have failed in a second attempt to enact private schools. However, there is a rousing speech from the head of the intelligentsia, Patrick Connolly. Possibly Glenavy's great rival, now that the Conservative Party has been diminished. Connolly, of course, took over from Edward Plunkett, a very popular leader of the intelligentsia who brought the country to the verge of civil war. And I was not impressed with Connolly. He's hated. He's a pacifist, and of course he was maybe seen as somebody who would support, or at least just keep his head below the parapets and not exactly try and upset things. So we could go with 15% enactment and get it over the 50% route, or Connolly begins to turn things around and starts to become quite popular with this new speech, plus drawing support towards the intelligentsia. All aboard for Cork. Ah, no, not Cork. Nobody wants to go to Cork. Courtesy of the good folks at the Cork Steam Locomotive Company, getting out of Dublin has never been easier. I don't want to go to either of the two of those. I didn't think we were close to finishing this, but I have basically put down one train track in every single province, and I got some of the provinces up to 2, and we have completed the engines of progress. We could get plus 10% railway building throughput. I'm going to go for the motor industries building throughput instead. And let's see, we have train tracks leading into Connacht. Of course, yeah, all the trains, they all have to go to Dublin first of all, don't they? There's that. Oh no, they don't have the train that awkwardly has to reverse into the station in Killarney. That's a bit of a disappointment. But other than that, we have train tracks everywhere. And like I said, I've gotten some of them up to level 2. And we're going to begin trying to use those to power some of our industries, because they will knock off the amount of labourers that are required. And we've gotten a pop-up, I did not see this, called The Red Menace, the rise of communism in powerful countries like the United Syndicates of America, has become a talking point in the Liberal Party election campaign, warning against a similar homegrown movement. Absolutely. They would be terrified of a repeat of the American regime. It may topple any day now, but that does not mean that we can take the threat of another government falling lightly. So Dublin streets will not run red with blood or otherwise. That will give momentum to the Liberals. Or Irish relations towards the United Syndicates of America improves by 20. I think we're going to add 30% momentum to the Liberal Party. We have enacted private schools, plus 1% wealth education access, and 20% intelligentsia political strength. If we try to reform our government, we are told that the best composition is the Free Trade Party and the Communist Party. The one thing they fear more than anything else. A fairly good, or at least an increase in legitimacy could be achieved if we kick out the petty bourgeoisie and bring in the intelligentsia. However, the petty bourgeoisie have to be in power as they are a member of the Liberal Party, I believe. They want to join the Liberal Party, and that will absolutely tank our legitimacy. So I don't think there's much that we can do at the moment. We can't bring in the Liberals. I don't get the feeling the industrialists would want to bring in the trade unionists. Do you know what? They could nearly rule on their own. They could nearly rule on their own just as well. They could nearly rule on their own just as well without the petty bourgeoisie. Thomas Glenavy now has complete control of the government. And I think with the level of control that he has, we could push towards a presidential republic, which is what I was considering, but there is overwhelming support amongst all of the factions. Well, I won't say all of the factions, but there is overwhelming support from a broad group of individuals for a parliamentary republic. The devout and the landowners are not very happy. So what we're going to do is Glenavy, now that he has taken control of the government, now that he has shown the monarchy just how serious the threat of communism is. They can't even trust the old order. The interest group that the new monarch is a member of has become communist. Glenavy is now going to convince His Majesty to institute a parliamentary republic. Now, one thing that we do need to do is, can we suppress them? We don't actually have the authority. We had maybe need to look at suppressing the devout. And I think, again, Glenavy, with his complete control of the government, might be in a position to do that. Now, here again is our problem. A revolution to preserve the monarchy. It's at plus 128. And it is predominantly from angry supporting interest groups and radicals. Oh, those radicals. We're getting minus 10% from secret police. I think Glenavy is probably going to be convinced that this issue needs to be withdrawn before we have Munster and Connaught secede. We do have all the armed forces in the east of the country, but all the same, the last thing that we need is another revolution. And indeed, the reason that he's trying to introduce this is to prevent revolution. So what we're going to have to do is we're going to have to focus on getting our authority up and using that to diminish the power of the devout, or possibly instituting other laws to diminish the power of the devout. But for now, Glenavy, after some 30 years of independence, or some 50 years of independence, I should say, he's come closest to bringing the monarchy to an end. But sadly, for now, he has failed. We are instead going to increase the level of our law enforcement to decrease radicals from standards of living decreases, which we have a substantial amount of at the moment. And the other thing that we're going to go for is the health system. We're going to move away from the devout charity hospitals, which is giving them increased political strength, and we will move towards private health insurance, which is supported by the industrialists, but is opposed actually by the trade unionists, and we will now end up radicalizing the devout faction. Just like his arch nemesis Edward Plunkett, who is remembered for bringing Ireland to the verge of revolution. That is pretty much what Thomas Glenavy is going to be remembered for as well. His heavy-handed attempts to remove the monarchy and push through reforms instituting a republic have brought Ireland again to the verge of another revolution. This time the landowners, once one of the most powerful factions in the country, along with the devout, threatening basically to once again break off Munster and Connacht, which had broken off before. Glenavy, while this isn't a heavy defeat and he has begun the process of diminishing the power of the devout, no doubt they are celebrating what they consider a victory, and Glenavy has retired in defeat and has died, as is customary of interest group leaders when they resign. We've been given a new pop-up, Springtime of the Peoples, or a new journal entry that we can push towards. One of the goals is that Ireland does not have monarchy enacted, so this is the path that Thomas Glenavy has set us on. He will not live to see it, but at least in his own lifetime he managed to prevent communism from taking hold in Ireland, and he has basically taken his party, the industrialist faction, and made them the most powerful, the single party in government. So, a tremendous life, tremendous achievements, but he will not live to reap the rewards of private health insurance. And just like the intelligentsia, so the great leader Edward Plunkett leave to be replaced by a not so great leader, so too do the industrialists see a useless old hedonist coming in. He's a radical, so he opposes secret police and National Guard. Secret police is something that was pushed through to help to keep down radicals, so it's something that Glenavy would have supported. So yeah, now that Glenavy is gone, I'm not too sure what this means for the future of the Industrialist Party. Proponents of liberal reforms are looking to spread their ideas to their neighbouring countries. What if the revolution fails? What if the Irish people are not ready for these ideas? Then we will have planted 1,000 seeds, and when Flag Ireland is ready, the fruit of those trees will seed our future with more seeds and fruit that birds will then eat. What we are, they will be. Great Britain gets the event Echoes of Revolution. Industrialists get Spread the Revolution for 2 years, plus 2% interest group approval, or the contagion must be contained. Industrialist gets Constrained the Revolution. Well, it depends what the revolution is, and of course we also have the rise of radicalism. And considering that we have a radical in power in the industrialists, what we are, they will be. Under the leadership of Kevin Taylor. I think that's him running through the streets screaming his head off. We should have probably looked at this one first of all. The radical movement is becoming very widespread in Ireland. Whether we support or oppose them, this heralds a time of great change and reaction. The people of the Irish nation have a right to rule themselves, free from the clutches of kings and aristocrats who hoard hereditary power. Oh, this is the type of stuff that Glenavy would like to have heard. We have made our demands clear. They will be met, or we shall take to the streets. We will win our freedom with the blood of martyrs if we have to. So it is clear that Glenavy was convinced by a more pacifist wing of the party to withdraw his calls for a parliamentary republic in the face of radicalism. And the more, or in the face of revolution, the more radical members of the party, possibly led by Kevin Taylor, have forced him out. In anger, they have said, no, we should have pushed through with the republic, and if the church and the landowners would have fought us, then we should have painted the streets with their blood. Support the conservative establishment. Taylor gets popular radical permanently. Plus 50 popularity. Ireland gets suppressing radicals for 2 years. Plus 20% of the upper strata pops become loyalist. Or we can support the radical movement. So he's becoming radical one way or another. Patrick Connolly will change his ideal to radical. Connolly gets radical permanently, and plus 5% pops in Ireland become more radical. Support the radical movement. We have seen Ireland brought to the edge of revolution yet again. For the third time, we reached a height of 90%. On the back of the three factions that are arrayed against us, the trade unionists, the communists, and the petty bourgeoisie. Now, we have actually kicked in and started suppressing, of all things, the trade unionists. It was showing that 90, plus 90 was as high as it would go, so it hit 90%. It is now dropping, but we are dangerously close to a revolution, and we have begun to suppress the trade unionists. Because they're pretty much the strongest of the factions that are attempting to overthrow the government. So we're getting plus 18 from radicals, and we're getting plus 80 from angry interest groups. And that is all coming from the clout of the trade unionists. So if we can suppress the unions for a while, here we have the industrialists, effectively the industrialists, suppressing the trade unionists. If we can keep them suppressed for a while, then we can push through private health insurance, which we're doing to suppress the church. The industrialists, basically, at this stage, are just lashing out at everyone. A lot of unhappy sounding people there. We have failed to pass private health insurance. However, we do have discord within the petty bourgeoisie and an opportunity to increase the attractiveness of the industrialist faction, plus 10% to interest group pop attraction, and a 10% chance to the enactment success the next time round. And on our second attempt, we have managed to pass private health insurance, which is at least going to diminish the power of the devout. It has radicalized them. And we're still dealing with the trade unionists. I think we're going to continue to suppress the trade unionists for a while. It's going to radicalize them as well. Yeah, they would be unhappy with the change from charity to private health insurance. The other good thing is that we are... Where should I be going? Over here to radicals. We have a lot of them, but the number is changing. It is decreasing. And we're seeing that there are some substantial changes to the figure from standard of living decreases. So we are bringing up the standard of living a bit. We've actually just brought it up from 16.4. And one of the things that I'm trying to do at the moment is pretty much the major issues are clothing and groceries. So I am expanding both of those. I'm expanding our textiles in Ulster and groceries in Leinster. I've actually turned the textiles off of luxury clothing completely. Glass is another one that they're complaining about, and that's also needed for... and electricity. But glass is one that's also needed for government purposes. So yeah, lots and lots of expansion in Leinster and Ulster. Munster, we're trying to get in some more convoys, and Connacht, at the moment, I've stopped military advancement there because there's nothing profitable. So we'll say if we build ammunition, ammunition is not profitable at the moment. So while we're dealing with our internal upheaval, we've basically put our plans of expanding the army on hold temporarily. The Dublin Ripper has finally been arrested. Who was it? Don't tell me it was Patrick Connolly. The killer known as the Dublin Ripper, who has long plagued the state of Leinster, has finally been arrested. We got the devil. A revolutionary for our time, a voice for the liberalism currently on the rise, has resonated with the rural folk. We can say that this is far too extreme for Irish politics with the way Irish politics is going at the moment. I don't know about that. Minus 4% or minus 4 interest group approval for the rural folk. I don't want the rural folk to become too powerful, but having a radical character in the rural folk might help support our push towards a parliamentary republic. This voice must be heard. And I missed the pop-up, but it would appear as though Jack Ash, our longest-serving general, has resigned and surely not immediately died. So we're going to appoint a replacement. There's Fionnán, still hanging around, being cruel. Patrick Larkin, wrathful. Sure, we'll take Larkin. We're going to pretty much have to, at this stage, begin the process of suppressing the church. So alongside the trade unionists, we're now suppressing the church as well. And yeah, I suppose that makes sense. That makes sense. Everyone's the radical party now. That doesn't make sense, though, for the industrialists to be the radical party. It kind of does and it kind of doesn't. Here we have the right of assembly, which would be supported by a number of parties that are currently being a bit problematic towards us, including the petty bourgeoisie and the trade unionists. The only problem is we can't implement any laws due to the fact that our legitimacy has tanked. So let's take a look at reforming the government. We could have a government made up entirely of nothing bar the communists. The other solution is everyone else ever in the whole world, which would get us on 25. This is the option I'm liking at the moment. So the Radical Party, which is in a position to rule pretty much on its own, has decided, I should say the industrialists, who are in a position to pretty much join on their own, have decided to bring in the intelligentsia, the rural folk, and the petty bourgeoisie into the Radical Party. So we're starting off with 0 legitimacy. If we bring in the armed forces, I don't know, is that going to give us enough support to actually pass any laws? We are entirely looking at a scenario where we may need to dump out the entire government and just have the Communist Party rule on its own. This is probably what His Majesty would support at the moment. So the radicals, or I shouldn't say the radicals, the industrialists, by being too radical, have basically created the one thing that they've tried to prevent, which is the likelihood of a communist government. I might just check when's the next election and leave it until then. 172 days. Let's just ignore the problem. So we now have another revolutionary movement, this time to enact protected speech, which is pretty much what we were just looking at. Either protected speech or census suffrage would probably be the best, because that has the support of pretty much everyone bar the landowners. So it would actually increase standing with the petty bourgeoisie, with a number of other groups, the rural folks, the trade unionists. So that would keep a number of groups happy. And from what I know, this is going to reach about 88 to 86%, 86 to 88%. So we shouldn't be looking at a revolution. Should we? Not before the election, anyway. The Radical Party. So this is it. This is how Ireland is now divided between the Radical Party and the slightly more Radical Party. Well, well, well. Look at the problems that Kevin Taylor's radicalism have caused. The only government composition that will work is the industrialists, bringing in the rest of the Radical Party, the petty bourgeoisie, the rural folk and the intelligentsia, and the Communist Party. This will just barely give us the legitimacy that's needed. The only problem is that we can't confirm because they are insurrectionary. Surely it's the communists they're talking about. No, it's not. It's all of these groups. So basically the Radical Party has now become insurrectionary. They will hold an insurrection unless we can enact some laws. I don't think we have an option. The industrialists have well and truly screwed themselves by becoming too radical. The communists, now serving under the monarchy, are going to push for census suffrage. The intelligentsia approve of this, as do the industrialists, the trade unionists, the rural folk, and the petty bourgeoisie. It doesn't look as though the army thinks anything about this, whereas if we take a look at what they are becoming insurrectionary over, protected speech, that's something that is not approved of by the militant communists that have now been instituted as the new government. So we're going to try and enact census suffrage. The communists are taking power out of the hands of the wealthy and extending it to the people. The one thing that the industrialists have been trying to prevent, the one thing, all of their actions have been towards preventing this moment. They've been trying to bring down the monarchy. They've been trying to introduce moderate to radical liberal reforms to preserve their own power. Ireland is now on the path to socialism. Triumph of the armed forces, with socialist ideas sweeping across Ireland. Alexander Maguire of the armed forces has been appointed to a leading position in the government. There is sufficient momentum for a rapid policy of change. Ireland enables wage subsidies in welfare. The armed forces will always select vanguardist, communist or anarchist leaders. Wow, okay, so the army is going to become permanently communist. So our options are that we can either guarantee wage subsidies, regulatory bodies, or basically, instead of passing laws, 33% interest group pop attraction for the armed forces going forward, which will always select communist rulers. This is going to hit the industrialists, and to a degree I do still want to try and save this playthrough for the industrialists. I'm going to go with guarantee fair wages. So this is going to introduce wage subsidies in welfare. We now have wage subsidies plus 50% welfare payments plus 2 max social security institution investment. I'm sure our bureaucracy might get hit now in a moment. Trade unionists are happy. The industrialists, they're not radicalized, but they oppose the recent changes. All who are willing to work have a right to eat. No man should lack the means to provide for his family. Considering the poverty that Ireland emerged from and how a fairly small ruling class has continued to cement power, trade it back and forth and fight over it since the foundation of the state, maybe the armed forces are onto something. We also have more stirring radicalism. It's hit Munster, it's hit the Irish Congo, and now it's going to hit somewhere else in Ireland. It could, of course, reside at the heart of our nation, in Leinster. I don't think I want to go for this option, however. Instead, it could happen anywhere. Instead of the capital, instead of Leinster, we're going to shift it to Leinster. The people still suffer under the tyrant heel of kings, priests, and capitalists. We must overthrow the reactionary government and establish a workers' paradise. Will complete if the following must be true for at least 5 years. Ireland has enacted Council Republic. Let's just see what support for a Council Republic would be like at the moment. So it's opposed by pretty much everyone except for the trade unionists and the armed forces. Speaking of which, obviously I think with the armed forces in power and heavily communist, they would stop suppressing the trade unions. I do need to kind of also keep an eye on the brewing revolution, but in fairness, this is actually dropping heavily now that we're trying to enact census suffrage. I don't know would they go so far as to start bolstering the trade unions, and the trade unions are a bit suspicious of the armed forces at the moment. When the army comes out as communist, it's always bad, even for the trade unions. Now, the state might be falling into the grips of communism, but it's not all bad news for the industrialists. They have expressed their satisfaction with the direction being taken by the country. So we've completed the factories, no, it's the farms to factories, journal entry. We could get some support for the industrialists, but instead we will go for 20% loyalists from standard of living increases, because we have very few loyalists and a lot of radicals. And first time's a charm, we have managed to push through census suffrage. Get some extra authority. Political strength from literate pops votes. This is going to have an interesting effect on the next couple of elections, because it's always been wealth voting up until now. Just been wealth voting, and the communists are still in power. So everyone seems pretty happy with that. Petty bourgeoisie, rural folk, trade unionists, the intelligentsia, and the industrialists. We can see that there has been a sizable drop in the number of radicals. We're still now having a revolution brewing over the implementation of protected speech. That is a bit more of a divisive one, especially as it is not actually supported by the armed forces. Literate men of a particular status are now given the vote, and literacy is not exactly something that we've been working on a huge amount. We haven't been doing great with the university so far, so it'll be interesting now to see how this impacts the next election. We are midways through the year 1889. I was going to go up to the end of the year before calling this episode to a halt, but I'm going to call it here instead because I have a question for you. We have just seen a movement created to enact a presidential republic. So we have three options: presidential republic, parliamentary republic, and both of those actually have pretty much the same outcomes in terms of the support of the parties. So the intelligentsia, the trade unionists, and the armed forces will support. Petty bourgeoisie, devout and landowners will oppose. And it's pretty much the exact same. On the other side, we have -12 government legitimacy with both. So one of the two of these is an option, probably easier to get through a presidential republic. Or we could hold off until we are in a position to push through a council republic. At the moment, pretty much everyone would oppose this, bar the armed forces and the trade unionists, who do not have, combined, they have less support than the industrialists. So that's my question. What should Ireland's next goal be? After a day or two, I might create a poll and actually put this to a vote on the channel. Are we going for a presidential republic or a parliamentary republic in the immediate, near future, or are we going to hold off and push to raise the red flag over Dublin? It has been an exciting 3/4 of a decade, I think is what I got covered in today's episode. We've undergone massive economic expansion. The line is getting even more upward turning. Our standard of living has decreased from about 16.5. That is causing a bit of problems. Our main issues continue to be clothing, porcelain, groceries, and glass, and meat, actually, strangely enough. So I've begun a big ranch building operation in Munster, desperately trying to expand the number of clothing factories we have in Ulster. I'm also trying to build more ports to create convoys, the way we can start importing some of this stuff, because it's clear that we are not in a position to deal with this ourselves. So there you go. What is the immediate future of all of these items that we have been building? Is Ireland going to try and remain? Are we going to push for liberal reform? Are we going to go full-blown communist? Or are we going to keep the monarchy? That choice is up to you. Post your options below in the comments, and when a poll goes up in the next few days, do make sure to vote. Thank you all very much for joining me on this one, and I do hope to see you on the next one.